All right, hi everybody, and welcome to the next presentation in our series. Today's presentation will be about waterproofing membranes and their compatibility. We'll cover off a few things today, like in particular, there will be the standards and different types of membranes used in certain types of areas. And then we'll get into what membranes will work over certain other types of membranes. And then we'll cover some questions as well. So please post your questions in using the chat function, and then we'll cover some question time at the end as well. All right, let's get started. So just quickly, a little bit about myself and Ron. So Ron, you want to give your intro?
Yeah, well, basically, I've been in the industry for about 40 years experience. So I like building industry, maintenance and service. I founded the Danrae group originally, my wife and I, and then basically Danrae, Daniel and Renee, my two kids. So they're both in the business now. And now I'm basically project managing, technical advisor, a bit of design work. So yeah, so my experience is basically I'm a licensed electrician by trade, licensed builder and licensed waterproofer. So, and I do a bit of consulting work as well. So, thank you.
And I'm Daniel, so I'm the current CEO of Danrae Group, and I've basically got about 15 years industry experience in the building game. And my main roles are strategy, sales and team development in the company. Okay, and Danrae Group itself as a company, we're a specialist remedial waterproofing contractor. What that means is we basically repair waterproofing issues on existing buildings. We're a trusted family business. We provide a lot of waterproofing solutions to four main industries: strata, commercial, government and civil. And we've done some major projects, in particular IKEA, Westmead Hospital, Anstow, the Kinghorn Cancer Centre, Camden Hospital, Bowral Hospital. So we've done quite a few on the major jobs on the project side as well, on government projects. So what we'll cover, so yeah, we've got the Australian standards for waterproofing and what is covered under there and what isn't. Also the materials review, so types of classes of membranes that are available in the marketplace. Also some typical membranes and where they're used in a building. And also membrane compatibility. So what membranes will work with other types of membranes, especially in the remedial side of things as well. So quick review of the Australian standards. There's basically four main areas of the standards. So there's the AS 3740, which covers the application of membranes for internal wet areas. The AS 4858 is the standard in which membranes are tested to. So the actual product itself is tested to that standard. And then the AS 3740 is for the applicator, so the standard to which we apply the membrane. The AS 4654 is divided into two parts, and it acts very much like the internal wet area one. So AS 4654.1 is the waterproofing membranes for external above ground use. So that's the actual standard that the membrane is tested to. And then the AS 4654.2 is the actual design and installation. So we use, as an applicator, we use that standard to see how we apply the membrane to the building.
And the reason you've got basically two standard on materials is the performance of a material externally is quite different to a material internally. And you'll find some materials that are tested externally will suffice for internal as well. So you be very careful of that. And plus, there's a lot of new products coming in from overseas, and are pretty cheap and nasty sometimes. And you need to make sure that they do comply, because the ones that are used in Australia have gone through the trouble of getting them all tested, and to make sure they do comply with our standards here.
Just on that, also with membrane testing, there are also other standards like sort of the brands testing and things like that. So like Ron was saying, there's a lot of membranes that will get imported from overseas, and we just got to make sure that they're actually tested to the Australian climate and the Australian standards as well. So just quickly, so for waterproofing membranes, there are generally there are three sort of classes of membrane, and they're determined by basically how much the membrane stretches, and we call that in the standard, it's called extensibility. So a class 1 would be very low to the class 3, which is quite flexible. And there's some examples of those would be, so your class 1 would be like a resin or fiberglass, or like water-based epoxy or shower tray, things like that, where it's quite rigid. And then class 2 membranes are generally more flexible. You'll get different liquid membranes, torch-on sheet membranes as well. And then class 3 are the most extensible. So they will flex the most under different temperatures. And that can be a salt like polyurethanes, sheet rubbers, and PVCs. Okay, so some details in particular, advantages, disadvantages. So going into the class 1, you've got sort of your flexible, your sort of the least flexible systems. These are used in various situations, like for example, like your shower tray there. The epoxies can be used as like a water barrier in a lot of situations, but they don't flex. They're not very flexible at all. So hence the disadvantages there. You just got to be very, very careful about the movement factor. So for example, if you've got like a shower tray that you're installing, and the joint between your wall sheeting and the shower tray, you've got a difference in two types of materials, so you've got potential movement there. Because the two materials are very rigid, the joint is a big problem between the two systems. So that rigidity is quite, you just got to be very aware of that. Class 2, generally you get, so specifically on acrylic-based systems, so acrylic meaning a water-based type of membrane in this situation. Quite easy to clean up with water-based membranes. Some of them are UV stable as well, and they're compatible with a lot of adhesives as well, so they're quite common using in internal wet areas. The only issue with acrylics during installation is they're quite susceptible to temperature. So especially with curing times, if it's in a colder climate, at the time it will take longer to go off. So it may seem like the membrane has cured, but it hasn't fully cured on the installation. So just along it sort of skins over, but it hasn't fully cured.
Yeah, some acrylics can dry very quickly, actually, and it's very deceiving because, like Daniel said, it has to be cured properly, especially when you're doing water tests and things like that. Okay, you actually can re-emulsify the membrane if it hasn't cured 100%. And also too, the data sheets will tell you certain drying times and things like this. It's ideal conditions. Okay, watch the temperatures, air movement, everything. They all affect the actual conditions of the membrane.
And also, they're not very root resistant either. So you'll find that you just got to be very mindful of what membranes you use where, because they're not root resistant at all, especially externally. And these type of membranes can also be very limited in their flexibility if you use impregnated like bandages and things like that. So you got to be very careful of that as well. So class 2 flexible systems, the torch-on modified bitumen membranes. So these are the sheet membranes. Great thing about these is you get guaranteed membrane thickness, and there are much longer term sort of durability for these types of membranes as well. UV stable in the granules on the top layer are the UV stable part of the membrane. The actual bitumen generally is not UV stable though. That it's the granules that make it UV stable. The only downside to these types of membranes is that you've got to apply them using flame. So there's a safety issue there. It generally requires more skill level, but can't be applied during wet weather either. So that's a big issue, and you've got to be very careful if there's any moisture in the slab too. And they're not compatible with any sort of fittings and PVC fittings and stuff like that. Class 3 elastomeric systems. So these are a lot more flexible, solvent-based polyurethane. So these, unfortunately, some of these do have a very strong odor. So you just got to be very careful with it speccing these types of membranes internally, because you'll get people complaining, especially in an existing remedial job. So you'll get tenants complaining of the smell. These are quite readily available, which is a good advantage. Generally not UV stable. However, some of these you can apply a UV stable top coat, which generally is a wear coat. So you have to keep reapplying that after so many years. And the polyurethanes are generally not root resistant, although a lot of suppliers will recommend that these get installed in planter boxes and stuff, but I'll show you some photos of some solvent-based membranes.
Yeah, what they in a planter, what they rely on sometimes is either the drainage cell or the protection board to give you that protection against roots, but it's not always guaranteed.
Class 3 sheet membranes, so butanol, rubber, things like that. So these are the most flexible under weather conditions, and they're quite UV stable, can be easily prefabricated. What that means is you can order basically metals and coated metals that will bond to these membranes that's part of the system. So you can send them away to make prefabricated flashings and drain inserts and things like that. So it's quite an advantage. Really, the only disadvantage with these, it's quite a high skill level to apply these. So generally, these membranes are more expensive, but they have a much longer lifespan than a lot of other membranes. And they've been tested in a root resistant as well. So there's a lot of advantages with using these in planter boxes as well. Okay, so some examples of some of the systems used. So looking at below ground types of membranes, you'll find that, especially in remedial, there's injection we can use. So that's also above ground. So below ground, above ground for injection materials. And there's also membranes that will act as a liquid damp course that stop rising damp in exterior walls. The membrane you're seeing on the bottom left there is what we call a bentonite sheet membrane. That's used a lot in subground installations. The way that operates that membrane is there's a bentonite clay behind that black, and that's bonded to that black sheet. As if the membrane's punctured, the clay will expand and basically blocks the water. So that's the bentonite sheet membrane, used a lot on retaining walls and things like that. PVC sheet can be also used below ground. That picture there is from a company called Fatra. They use a yellow membrane. Makes it easier to spot any pinholes. So it basically contains a yellow facing out, and then the black is internal, so you can see the difference in the two types of membranes. Some more examples are what we call blinding membrane systems. So these membranes are installed before the structure is built. So the yellow one you're seeing there on the left is a FPO, similar to a PVC, but it's made of different composition. But it is installed on the formwork, and then the concrete is then poured up against the membrane itself, forming a mechanical and chemical bond. And on the right, it's that's an SBS sheet. So they're basically a bitumen-based sheet, and that's installed as well. And the concrete's then poured to that as well. Planter boxes. So there's a few products available on planter boxes. These are a few, but there is more available. The Ardex Root Repel membrane is a butanol membrane that is heat welded. It contains a product that actually repels the root from the membrane. Sika Sarnafil's a PVC as well, and same with Flagon. The Index Defend is a Torton membrane that contains some root inhibitor in the membrane itself. What you're seeing on the right is an example of what roots can do, especially with a liquid membrane, which is the photo on the left. Basically, it ends up like it goes in and out of, weaves in and out of the membrane. So as soon as the roots find a small pinhole, yeah, it'll just penetrate it. So things to keep in mind are really what type of plants are being used, and also be very mindful of the type of membrane.
Yeah, you try and when installing planter boxes and planting, you try and avoid very aggressive root systems to minimize your efforts, to minimize the possibility of damage. And the roots sometimes can actually penetrate liquid membranes. Besides finding a hole, they can actually sometimes cause a hole into the membrane, so which is very tricky.
Okay. So some other systems that are available on the market now. So the one on the far left is what's called the Weddy board. That's a system that is basically replaces the linings of the bathroom. It's a waterproof system, so you're using it instead of your FC sheeting, screed, and waterproof membrane, basically. So it combines all three of those, and you're putting that in one wall sheet. All the fixings are waterproof as well, and the shower tray is actually designed to falls as well. So it's all one system. So that's quite a new system now available from Germany. The middle system there we use quite extensively in internals. It's the Ardex WPM butanol-based system. It basically has a mesh on the outside of the membrane that you can actually glue tiles directly to, and it's a heat welded system. So it's a sheet system as well. So the longevity on that type of membrane far outweighs a liquid.
The biggest problem with liquids is the actual film thickness. So you need to make sure that basically when the product is completely installed, it's the primer and two coats, that you've got a dry film thickness as recommended by the suppliers, whereas the sheet membranes are basically made to their specifications, and they are pretty much plus or minus a few microns or whatever in size, so you can guarantee a particular thickness as well.
And on the far right, there's the Shonox system. So very similar to the butanol, except it's not actually a heat welded system using a hand welder. It uses liquids to bond the membrane and on the joints and onto the substrate. Quite a quick system as well, and it allows you to also direct stick tiles too as well. So with the sheets, with these types of systems, obviously there's no drying time. So you can generally put the membrane down and you're already applying your tiles or screed, or it's quite quick. Systems for roofing. So generally with roofing, we would highly recommend a sheet membrane. Reason being, you just got a lot more properties for sort of weather resistance and heat resistance, things like that. And the longevity of the membrane just far outweighs a liquid. On the far left, the PVC systems, very good with heat reflection. especially when in combination with insulation, which I'll show you in the next slide. With that particular job there, actually, the tenants actually noticed a 2 to 3 degrees difference in the temperature of the penthouse below, installing that membrane. The middle one is the torch-on system, so that's used quite extensively on roofing these days. Reason being, generally consultants and strata, they like the actual thickness of it. Only issue with torch-on is that the granules are generally the heat, the UV resistant component of the membrane, which can wear. So that's the only thing, you do get a bit of a lifespan on that. So you'll have to either be recoating that or repairing that if the granules wear away. Hence why it's important to have some sort of maintenance plan on these types of roofing membranes to ensure that you're getting the lifespan out of them. The far right one is also the butanol. So the butanol can be used internally and externally as well. And that photo you're seeing there is on a terrace. So that terrace there would be tiled and then, screeded and then tiled over that.
And there is another butanol membrane that can be exposed to UV on an exposed roof. So there's different varying types depending on what you're actually installing.
Yep. So this is a typical roof system. So on the left, you've got more of a traditional design, very, very common in rooftop design, especially in strata with flat roofs. And on the right, you've got the newer design now that is widely used overseas, and it's just coming into Australia now. So on the far left, you'll notice the difference in layering. So you've got the concrete deck, the primer for the membrane, 2 layers of membrane, so waterproofing, and then the second layer, generally there's then the insulation, then there'll be a filter cloth, and then some form of ballast for basically generally to hold the components down, but also use as a heat reflective medium as well. On the right, you'll see that a change in that. So the insulation on the left is actually nowadays not so much, but before, the insulation used to absorb a lot of moisture, and essentially your R rating of energy efficiency completely diminishes as soon as that water gets into the insulation, only because then the water is obviously a conductive material, so then it just radiates heat straight through into the roof. Whereas on the far right, the membrane is actually protecting all of the layers, so the membrane is actually exposed in this situation. So it's the last thing we apply. One also, the good thing is that if you need to check the membrane, it's exposed, so you can check the lapse on a regular basis and ensure you're getting the longevity out of the membrane. Whereas on the left, you need to remove all those mediums above the membrane to check it. And also the membranes are then designed to reflect heat, so you're getting a much better energy efficiency out of the right design.
You can also, with the right membrane, you can actually get membranes that are white, which really gives you a very ultimate, basically heat reflection. But unfortunately, you need to get permission where it can be used, because it is very reflective. So in some cases, it could be very blinding for, say, units above that roof or whatever. So you need to get permission from councils or whatever to actually install it. But that's heavily used overseas because of the different temperatures there and that. So yeah, it's very important to look at that.
Okay, so some membrane compatibility options. This is quite typical in remediation too. So this is a good one for the consultants and strata managers to understand what can and can't be done. Quick disclaimer though is that in these types of situations, the manufacturer and the data sheets are a critical thing with this type of thing, especially when you're going over existing membranes. So what I'll show you is some of the slides and information from the Master Builders waterproofing guides, which are quite extensive in this information. But like the disclaimer says, a lot of membranes are designed differently as well, so it can depend on the supplier.
And another important note too, in some cases, the suppliers will require to remove the existing membrane to get maximum bond and get maximum warranty on their membrane. So you need to really consult with your suppliers and to make sure you get the best benefit out of the whole situation.
Okay, so bitumen liquids. So bitumen liquids are quite readily available type of liquid, used a lot in older buildings as well. And the bitumen-based membranes are, if you've got an existing bitumen membrane there, you know, it's quite straightforward. You can use a bitumen on a bitumen. But you'll notice that all the other common membranes don't react very well with bitumen. So reason being, and Ron, you can probably fill in on this one, the bitumen will actually react with the chemicals within the other membranes.
Yeah, in some cases, it actually draws plasticizers out of the membranes and all that. And for example, with PVC, it can make it very brittle, and same as polyurethane. So yeah, there's a chemical reaction. Also, again, using bitumen on bitumen, in some cases, you need to make sure that the composition of the product, because you get some modifications and some modified bitumens. So you just need to, again, consult the supply just to make sure you're on the right track.
So polyurethane. So polyurethanes are another type of, they're quite a flexible membrane, very, very widely used liquid membrane. As you can see, they won't go over a bitumen, as explained earlier. The two will react, so you'll get a reaction that draws out the plasticizers out of the polyurethane, which basically turns it brittle. So polyurethane you can install over existing polyurethane, but the existing polyurethane membrane that's there, that's got to be reactivated in some form or fashion. Otherwise, you won't get a key or bond between the two. And as with the other ones too. So the acrylics, PVCs, polyesters, they've either got to be primed or ensure that that to get a bond between them.
Again, it's I know we keep repeating this, but you need to consult your supplier when you're applying membranes on membranes, because there's different primers for different situation, and that best suits that particular your particular situation. So you just want to confirm that and make sure that it's no issues there down the track, because some of these reactions will be down the track, not sometimes instantaneously. So you won't say, "Oh God, there's a problem here." You might not see nothing for a couple of years or something.
So acrylics on other membranes. So these are like a water-based liquid membrane. Most will they'll be fine. So on another acrylic, it'll be okay. But I'll put a note there, not to be used as like a bond breaker. So the problem is in a bathroom, if it's an acrylic, say sealant, or used on or used over an acrylic. So you've got sealant acrylic membrane. The two of them will bond. You don't want that to happen in the corners, because in the bond breaker in the corner has to be flexible. So you don't want the two to actually bond together, because then you'll get cracking. So the acrylic, generally speaking, you can't use on bitumen, polys, or PVC. But depending on the supplier, you might be able to find certain primers.
Yeah, the problem, not so much a problem, but there's new products coming in the market all the time, and a lot of these situations can vary. Again, like we can look at it. There are some products that will go over bitumen, but they have to be certain modifications. And same as the polyester resin is very hard to bond to, but again, certain products will go. And same as a PVC for that matter. There's new primers now that are coming out that, again, you can use it, but you need to be wary of it with the supplier and just double check.
So PVCs on other membranes. So in the case of sort of using a PVC sheet membrane, over bitumen, or like a torch on bitumen or something like that, it can be done, but you have to have that separation. So otherwise, the bitumen and the PVC sheet membrane will also react. So a lot of PVC's sheet membranes these days, they have the felt backing that will provide that separation layer between the two membranes. And generally speaking, in this situation, you'll find that if the membrane on the existing substrate is actually bonded well, you can then put a membrane over the top. Where we wouldn't advise doing that is if the membrane on the substrate isn't sound, or you've got loose or flaking or something like that. That's the issue. You've got to be very careful of.
And in some cases too, again, looking at building by building or roof by roof, or whatever, is that you can mechanically fix membranes as well. So as long as, again, you may need a separation layer, but you might find the glues don't maybe stick to the acrylic or whatever, and then in which case you'd put a mechanical fixing to it. Again, maybe putting PVC on PVC. Sometimes the suppliers, to get a good warranty, might require you to remove the old PVC. Again, you take it job by job basically, and see what the suppliers would. We normally tend to get the suppliers heavily involved, so then we eliminate any risk for our clients.
And modified PU. So the modified PU membranes, they're basically a type of liquid membrane. Generally, they go over an existing poly. That's fine. And acrylics, same deal. So they can't be used as a bond breaker as well. Generally speaking, they won't work over, say, for example, like a PVC. However, there are some membranes that say if the manufacturer of the PVC membrane may manufacture a liquid membrane that bonds to that and actually is designed to do that. So, in that respect, that will work as well. You can do that in some respects. Okay, I did have a case study. One second. Isn't that showing? One sec. Okay, let's just, I'll bring up the case study. Sorry, guys. There we go. So yeah, Peel Street, Kirribilli. So with this job here, we had an existing, it's basically a podium type of roof area. And it had an existing liquid membrane on the roof there, and it was leaking pretty badly into the units below. So with this job, you'll see the before and after. So up the top there, on the top left and right, we didn't remove the existing membrane. Basically what we did was we took away any of the loose membrane on this roof, and we went straight over it with a PVC membrane. So as you can see, the bottom left photo there is our guys laying down the glue. So this was a glue fixed membrane with a felt back. So it had the felt on it, and this was installed over the existing liquid membrane.
Yeah, the felt acts as like we mentioned earlier, the separation layer for the torch-on membrane, so that way it won't affect the actual PVC.
And they had a lot of issues on the terminations too, on that wall there, with the cavity flashing. So on the terminations, we then installed a new, or basically terminated the membrane into the brickwork, but also installed a new flashing along the edge there. And that's how guys installing it there. So as you can see, where they've had to bond the membrane in the junction, they've ground that off and left the existing membrane there because that was fairly sound on that. All right, so we'll take some questions if you guys want to. If you want to use the chat box, we'll go through them, and let's just see if we can bring some up.
We did have one question where basically they mentioned, why do builders pick all different types of membranes
for balconies in particular? Yeah,
for balconies in particular. But again, builders will unfortunately look at the cost, okay, and try and do the job as cheaply as possible. What you got to be careful of is, if you've gone to the trouble, especially of ripping up a balcony, you should look at ideally as a very efficient membrane, and they tend to cost a little bit more, but you don't want to be ripping up a balcony every 10 years or whatever. And another big misconception with what we mentioned earlier, or the elongation or the stretch of a membrane, if you apply it to a concrete surface and the concrete actually cracks, then it could damage the membrane, in which case it's not covered under warranty. So we prefer to push the sheet membranes, being butanol or whatever, torch iron, butanol or PVCs, depending on the situation, and you get decent longevity out of these membranes.
So a question from Patrick, what would you recommend for a garage basement wall that is leaking water during heavy rain, like the last few days? The external wall is painted and exposed to the elements. It is a single skin cavity wall. How would you waterproof it? Right, so there's a few options there. So you want to talk about reverse tanking or the...
Yeah, well, firstly, okay, I'm not sure if it's below ground. There's no standards for below ground, so we rely on, well, they're actually reviewing that at the moment, but currently there's no standards for below ground, and you rely a lot on the suppliers' designs and specifications. Also, so in your particular case,
it's above ground.
This is an above ground one, right?
Yep.
Oh, I just got the basement. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Well, what you can do is externally, if you can get to the external wall, it's more likely just painted with a just normal paint, whatever, which has got minimal flexibility, in which case we recommend probably stripping the paint up to the level you want, and then overcoating it with a waterproof paint, which we can waterproof membrane, which can be colored to match existing colors available from basically Dulux colors. Okay, if you can't get to the outside, or there's an issue with the outside, then there's other products, what we call reverse tanking, which is you do it on the inside of the situation. But you did mention it's a cavity, so you would try to do that from the outside basically, because you've got the cavity to deal with. So you would tend to strip the paint and then apply a it's a single skin, single skin cavity wall. So in which case you'd strip the paint to the level, to or above the level that you've got an issue, and then apply a waterproofing paint. Then you can paint the wall all with the waterproofing paint, but you need to strip that area, because make sure you want the waterproofing paint to get onto it properly.
Question from Darren. So what is your thoughts on trafficable membranes for rooftops? Thoughts on trafficable, there are a few options with that type of solution. First of all, there are liquids that are trafficable, but the problem with the liquid trafficables is that they've got to be recoated because of you'll have a UV sort of wear coat on most of them. So just be very, very mindful of the warranty periods and maintenance on those.
In general, if you apply a membrane onto a roof that you want to make it trafficable, on a rooftop, it doesn't matter which membrane you pick. They're not considered trafficable like common traffic, like as if the entertainment area or things like that. They are trafficable as far as maintenance traffic. In other words, getting on the roof to check air conditioning or cooling towers or things like this. if you've got constant traffic, for example, we've done in hospitals where you've got the maintenance traffic to the cooling towers on a regular basis, then we actually install walkway pads that are welded onto the PVCs, and the trades walk on them, because that's another defect in a sense long-term, is wear and tear on the membrane. If you actually continue to walk on it, and especially on a particular area, you'll wear it like any other product, in which case a lot of the membranes have got basically two colors, like they've got a gray and a darker gray underneath, or white and a darker gray underneath. So when you do wear the top layer, you will start seeing this darker layer indicating to you that, hang on, I've got a problem here. So to alleviate that, you tend to put walkway pads, torch on, bitumen based. In summer, 40-degree heat, you're going to mark it. You're going to create marks in that, if not damage it. Especially if you're entertaining with heels and things like that, you'll puncture it. So it's recommended that if we're doing a job currently that people are looking at using it or to get access onto the roof, then we're actually installing a artificial grass over the membrane, in which case that'll give them protection on the membrane and they can use it more freely. That's a way, but there are options. We've had even carpet, like a weatherproof carpet, like they use in boats, applied on an area on the membrane, so people can get this particular job that people wanted to look at the fireworks at New Year. So it gave them that bit of flexibility on the roof. But you need to look at or discuss it with the contractor, what you actually want to use the roof for.
And also you've got options like decking, pedestal, like pavers on pedestals, things like that, where you don't need to install, say for example, a screed on the roof. So you use a pedestal system where there's essentially just the pedestal and the tiles or the pavers, and then you can lift the paver and see the membrane. So it's great for maintenance or running. You can still access directly to the membrane, and the water drains away very easily.
Yeah, we've actually installed decking over torch-on membranes, and even like Daniel mentioned, pavers on a polypad system, which is quite effective because even it drains well and can be easily maintained and replaced, and services can be run underneath it if you need to at a later date as well.
Any other questions? We might just hang for another 15 seconds. Thanks, Darren. No problem. Thanks, Patrick. Yes. So with the presentation, I can email the slides, but what we will do is we're going to start making our workshops available online. So watch this space. We will have the videos available. And
if there are other questions that you think of, a bit later on after we finish, feel free to email them to us at inquiries@danrae.com.au. And we're quite happy to answer any questions you have. Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions we've got, I think. Well, Listen, everyone, thank you so much for attending. Watch this space for more presentations coming soon. We do these every month, so you'll see generally in the last week of the month, you will see a new presentation come through. So keep online, and we'll see you soon. Yeah, we've got one more. We've got one more coming up in November, which is be the last one for this year due to the festive season. Hopefully, we get a good festive season this year, considering what we've been through. But we may be looking at possibly what strata managers or building managers need to look at when they're actually looking at the membranes and all the varying quotes they may get and all the proposals they may get. That might be something to look forward to as well. We'll try and put something together for that, because we get a lot of people asking us why is there a big price difference, or why have you gone this way as compared to that way, things like this. So it gives you an idea what to be aware of, and maybe help make decisions in the final decision making of the actual contractor or the project, because it could make a big difference. All right, everybody. Well, thanks a lot. And I'll see you at the next presentation. Talk soon. Have a great afternoon. Yeah, thank you again, and bye. Thanks, everyone.